people should seek out placebos. They just shouldn't replace the actual effective medication with placebos. Placebos can be a complement, borderline like aligning your chakras to connect everything you'll heal your like brain cancer. It's sadly just not true. Certain problems you have are just a chemical imbalance in the brain. That's true. He wasn't categorical about homeopathy. I wouldn't crucify him on this. I think Chud Logic is a tiny bit unfair to have at least some kind of chance of getting healed. And they put you in the placebo control group. Imagine that. There actually is very real evidence of meditation and breathing techniques having therapeutic benefits within psychology. The music I was listening to was completely glitched out. Anyways, hello, welcome to the stream. So, as the title indicates, I am going to be checking out what's this new Dr. K drama shit. So like this video is from February 4th. Continuing my Loop Hero playthrough while watching this. Oh, okay, so it does go over the rectal stuff. It goes back 2 years ago.
I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but there are people that are in my practice that have been on treatment for like have been in therapy and medication for anxiety for like 15 years. And within 6 months, we're taping them off of medication and they feel fantastic. Why? Is it because I'm a brilliant clinician? No. This is what I'm saying. I'm not actually any better. It's just I use tools that none of my colleagues use. I use Ayurveda.
Hello there. Welcome to this video.
Ayurveda.
So, it's been a few days, 30 plus hours of coverage, and finally, here we are. Not perhaps at the end, but at a significant point of the tale. So what's led us here? Why am I doing this? What's the situation? We'll get into some of that. But here's what you really need to know. I can't say for sure what the outcome of this is going to be. But what I can tell you is I don't like bullshit. That is the fundamental reason, other than the content creation, is I don't like bullshit. And through recent events, I came to see that unfortunately there is a popular figure that has been pushing what I would call bullshit. So let's get into this. Let's talk about it, okay? And we'll kind of see where we go. Now, in order to bring this together, I decided to create a manifesto. My first manifesto. So some of this will be a little bit just of me reading what I've written, maybe some elaborations on certain points. And then eventually we're going to get to the actual content, the meat and potatoes, as they say. And we're going to watch some of the content that I've got concerns about, and we'll go from there, okay? So, first of all, let's begin with an introduction. How did we get here? So, on the 29th of January, I became aware that YouTuber and Twitch streamer mrgirl was making some extremely strong criticisms of the ethical practice of one Dr. K, who is known online as Dr. K. Now, Dr. K is a psychiatrist and also co-founder of healthygamergg, which is a website that claims to provide mental health support for the internet generation. Now, just to be clear, I am not in this segment looking to necessarily comment on the broader conversation that's occurring about the nature of Healthy Gamer, what it does, etc., okay? I'm focused on what I'm focused on, which will become clear as we go through this, and probably from the title of the video, okay? So, as well as being co-founder of healthygamer.gg, Dr. K also creates content under the healthygamergg brand on both Twitch and YouTube. So, how specifically did I get to be here? Well, mrgirl had uploaded a conversation with a healthygamer.gg coach on his second YouTube channel. I watched the interview on stream. Following this, I began to further investigate Dr. K's content and the healthygamer.gg website. I became aware through a post on, would you believe it, a subreddit, the Destiny subreddit, to be more specific, that the Wikipedia, or the wiki part of the Healthy Gamer website, has an article on Ayurveda. Ayurveda. I'm always going to have trouble pronouncing that, okay? It is what it is. The article is extensive, and although I'm unable to confirm who wrote it, it was clearly authored by someone with knowledge of the subject. I didn't know what it was at the time, and the wiki page made some very strange claims, so I did some further reading. So the first thing that we need to do is talk about Ayurveda and Dosha. So let's get into that. What is Ayurveda? Ayurveda is an alternative medicine. Now, what that is any practice that aims to achieve the healing effect of medicine, but is untested, untestable, or proven ineffective. So it's an alternative medicine system from India. Ayurveda is considered pseudoscience and the Indian Medical Association has called for more action by the Indian government to crack down on Ayurvedic medical practitioners, referring to them as quacks. According to the NCCIH, there is limited and flawed research that Ayurvedic medicine may reduce pain and help manage symptoms for a couple of health conditions, but broadly, there is little scientific evidence on the value of Ayurveda for health issues. To dig a little deeper, NICE is a UK organisation that deals with the use of health technologies and clinical practice. They have collated a number of studies on Ayurvedic medicine. From the ones I looked at, it seems like, at best, some of the treatments may help with certain conditions, but further research was required. In some cases, it is no better than a placebo, or there was no clear evidence that Ayurvedic medicine benefited patients. So, let's move on to... what I'm trying to highlight to you here is that the scientific consensus, or the science on Ayurveda, doesn't look too good for Ayurveda. There is essentially minimal evidence that it is anything more than like a placebo or like pseudoscience, and it sits as an alternative medicine system, okay? So, let's continue on to the next point. One key aspect to highlight in order to make sense of the rest of the document is the concept of dosha.
Okay, there is one thing that I want to point out. People throw around the word placebo when we're talking about pseudo-medical procedures without really understanding what it actually means for treatment. Placebo has to be understood as, indeed, if something, for example, actually has side effects but is only a placebo, that's really terrible. If something is expensive and is just a placebo, that's terrible. But we should be exploiting the power of placebo in treating people. So something being a placebo effect, it's good to be aware of it. There's nothing, people should be properly informed, but there's nothing inherently wrong in alternative treatments being placebos. People should seek out placebos. They just shouldn't replace the actual effective medication with placebos. Placebos can be a complement to actual medication. And in the rare and unfortunate cases where there is no treatment, then they're better than nothing. The placebo effect is an actual effect. It's not an absence of effect. That being said, of course, like anyone selling a placebo claiming it's actual medicine, that is problematic. But the idea that placebos don't heal at all, I think, is also problematic, and people seem to be taking that stance by default, and it kind of bothers me. Like everything you can gain is there's a French expression, tout est bon à prendre. Any advantage, any bonus, you got to take it. So if there's a placebo effect to take for treating whatever you've got, take it. But if you instead you can take real medication, take the real medication. Don't ever go for like weirdo placebo shit if you have better alternatives. So yeah, also what he said is that some of the treatments may help with certain conditions. So this is not like entirely disparaging either, but let's see what else he says.
What is dosha? Well, let's talk about that. This is from the Healthy Gamer wiki page on Ayurveda itself, and I'm just going to read through it, okay? Ayurveda is based on the idea of doshic balance, which is the of three major patterns that govern people's characteristics in mind called doshas. Every individual has a unique cognitive fingerprint, and different people have different kinds of cognitive fingerprints. There are three doshas in Ayurveda. Number 1, Vata, or wind. Number 2, Pitta, or fire. And number 3, Kapha, or earth, water. If we look at people's physical bodies, we know that there are three types of people. There are people with very fast metabolisms who can eat whatever they want to, and they will not gain a whole lot of weight. Then there are people with medium builds. There are also people whom we call big-boned. Vatas have fast metabolisms. Medium-build people are Pittas, and big-boned people are Kaphas. However, Vata and Kapha appear to be opposites, but they're actually independent from each other. Just to remind everyone, this is from the Healthy Gamer wiki page on Ayurveda. So, if people were looking for a resource from the Healthy Gamer community, it's likely that on Ayurveda, this is likely the kind of information they come across, okay? Let's continue.
Okay, this shit is a bit weird.
In addition, each person has each dosha, but not all people are the same in doshic balance. These doshas are like stats in an RPG, where some people can have more of a certain dosha than another person, and therefore more inclined for certain roles or classes. But higher stats do not necessarily mean better outcomes in terms of doshic balance, okay? to get a complete picture of your doshic balance, you should not look for an online quiz, but rather an Ayurvedic physician who will do a complete body-mind analysis because your Ayurvedic makeup expressed through your genetic makeup. Okay. Now, just to follow on, here's a couple of just two miscellaneous facts that I wanted to share with you about Ayurveda in general, okay? So, a study showed, and this is completely miscellaneous, I'm not linking this directly to Dr. K at all, this is just miscellaneous facts that I thought were interesting about Ayurveda, just to be perfectly explicit, okay? A study showed that 20% of Ayurvedic medicines purchased via the internet contain detectable lead, mercury, or
I shouldn't be laughing at that. That's fucking...
To zoom in a bit closer from the study,
that's fucking
estimated
horrible.
daily lead, mercury, and arsenic intakes for these products were all higher than regulatory limits. We identified several
That's a
Rasa
yikes.
Shastra medicines that could cause lead and mercury ingestions exceeding US Environmental Protection Agency limits by 3 to 4 orders of magnitude. Okay, so that's miscellaneous fact number 1. Now, here's miscellaneous fact number 2. Apparently, medical knowledge was transmitted from gods to sages, then to physicians. Dhanvantari, the Hindu god of medicine, incarnated himself as King Varanasi and taught medicine to a group of physicians. So, just a couple of miscellaneous facts, okay? So, where does this all fit in with Dr. K? So, moving on, Dr. K, Ayurveda, and other concerns. Through engaging with Dr. K's content, it is clear that he has a strong belief in Ayurveda. Not only does he talk about it in both his solo content and interviews on Twitch or YouTube, he is also associated with a few Ayurveda organizations, and it is mentioned a few times on his website. We'll come back to that in a sec. He presents himself as both a psychiatrist using standard psychiatric training alongside an evidence-based background in Ayurvedic mental health. That's taken from his website. This presentation is concerning because I was unable to find substantial scientific evidence that supports the idea that Ayurvedic healthcare is based in evidence. Further to this, in looking at Dr. K's content, I've found a number of alarming claims that Dr. K has made about both Ayurveda as well as other miscellaneous medical-related views. I will go over this now. Let's have a look. First of all, I just want to review his website, okay? Because there's a perception that Dr. K is not using Ayurveda in any further capacity than to tell stories or to inject some sort of spirituality into his coaching or something like that, okay? So let's have a little look and see. So if we go to his website, first of all, the key things that I want to highlight here is that he is an associate editor for this journal here, the Ayurveda Journal of Health. And further to that, he is also a member of an organization called the Council of Ayurveda Research. Now, I personally have not had time to investigate that organization.
Modulated.
So, all those organizations. So, I'm not looking to comment further, other than just to highlight to you that Dr. K, in his private website here, in relation to his psychiatry practice, it is clear he has some sort of meaningful involvement with organizations that are concerned with research into Ayurveda, okay? So, that's all I'm looking to highlight by showing you this. Now, going back to the manifesto. What I wanted to do here is I've got some clips where I've got more specific things that I want to say. But before we get to that, what I want to do is just give a bit of a baseline. I want to show you the kinds of things and the kinds of points that Dr. K has made in his content in regards to Ayurveda, okay? So, let's watch this first of all. So.
We're going to take this big thing, and then we're going to take another thing over here like, diet preferences. Okay? And we're going to combine those two and see if we can come up with something even bigger. So this is how Ayurveda works. Ayurveda says, is there any correlation between someone's memory and the type of skin that they have? Is there any correlation between their mental, like cognitive fingerprint, and their weight? Is there any correlation between how constipated they are and how their heart functions? So what Ayurveda tries to do is it takes individual pieces and then it tries to construct patterns. And Western medicine does the opposite. It takes a whole thing, like when someone is sick, and it tries to divide them into its component pieces. So if you have an infection, you've got cough, and you've got fever, and you've got this, and you've got this. Let's treat cough with this. Let's treat fever with this. Let's treat this with, the third symptom with the third thing. And so what happens is, like, over time, as people become sick in Western medicine, they have a lot of targeted treatments for each of their problems. So you've got 2 medications for your blood pressure, you've got 1 medication for your diabetes, you've got an asthma inhaler, and then you've got, like, physical therapy for your knees. And then you also take like Tylenol because you have arthritis. So over time, like what we do is we treat individual things. So we've got like a treatment here, a treatment here, a treatment here, and a treatment here. And so people end up with 4 treatments, right? This is how Western medicine works. What Ayurveda says is there any correlation between this? Is there a broad pattern that we can observe? And if there is that pattern, can we treat this and thereby improve this, and improve this? If we treat sort of the overarching pattern.
So this is the classic justification for holistic. You'll hear this often when people promote like Eastern medicine and stuff. They'll be describing this idea that holistic approaches are inherently better than targeted approaches, which is just not objectively true. There can be a reasonable criticism of the fact that modern medicine, by specializing in different areas, misses out on certain holistic realities. Holistic being like the whole body and the interactions between different parts of the body. But the problem is, usually when people start talking about this, they go into full-on pseudoscience mysticism, in like borderline like aligning your chakras to connect everything to you'll heal your like brain cancer by wiggling the thumb on your little foot, or the like your toe, sorry, or something. I'm exaggerating for effect, but you get my point.
Sort of address all of the components at the same time. And so what Ayurveda comes up with over here is something called doshas. So these are elemental balances. So what Ayurveda says is that people who are prone to ulcers are also prone to anger and irritability, and are also of medium build, and also tend to like lose their hair earlier than people who like, so this is something called pitta. Okay, so like anyway, so pitta has some correlated physical and mental characteristics. Vata has some correlated physical and mental characteristics, and Kapha has some correlated physical and mental characteristics. And by improving the three doshas in and of themselves, you actually treat all of this like the component symptoms. And there's actually data that supports this, okay? So now what we got to do, okay, I got to fix this, okay? So Ayurveda believes that we all have a doshic, or elemental balance. And what that means is that we've got these three forces called Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and that Vata, Pitta, and Kapha have each like a certain level, and that their levels sort of determine what attributes we have that are physical and mental, okay? So let's talk for a second about, so Vata is like characterized by air, Pitta is characterized by fire, and Kapha is characterized by earth. They each also have second elements, but we won't get into that. So the first thing to understand is like what Ayurvedic physicians observed is they notice like some people are kind of like air or kind of like the wind. And what that means is that their mental thinking is what I'd call dynamic. So if we think about the wind, like how does what are the properties of wind? So it blows really hard and then it stops. It blows in a different direction and then stops. And then it blows over here and it blows over there. It can blow hard or it can blow light. It can just, it's just very variable, right? If we compare that to something like fire, does fire burn in one direction and then randomly turn around and burn in a different direction and then randomly turn around and burn in a third and then it stops and starts up again? No. So fire is sort of driven, focused, unidirectional. Right? These are like fundamentally different like properties, like they're dynamic ways of kind of thinking. And then they looked at Kapha, which is earth, and they noticed like, okay, there's a third kind of person who doesn't like move in a particular direction in sort of a driven and focused way. They're actually like very stable and constant. So they can also move, like earth can move too. Like, I mean, you can think about, you know, I mean, I guess we don't really think about earth moving, but they sort of noticed that there were kind of three mental types, and what they tried to do is like assign them certain kinds of elemental values because that's what they saw. So the other thing with Kapha is they're also water. So the other way you can think about, like, you know, water sort of always finds a way. So like I think about Kapha as kind of being earth and water. So water is going to like move slowly and surely. So if you think about the way that like a riverbed changes over time, like a river is going to like cut into the ground beneath it. It's going to be slow and steady. So maybe that's a better way to put it. Slow and steady. Right? So we actually have like three sort of mental qualities. So there are those people that are super dynamic and they kind of get excited about things and then they forget about things and then they lose, they buy a guitar and then they don't play the guitar. And then there are pittas who sort of buy a guitar and then kind of like play it for a while and are sort of driven and focused. And then there are kaphas that are slow and steady. So the decision to buy a guitar happens after months of deliberation. But once you get a guitar, you're going to like practice like every day for years and years and years. So the three basic like mental approaches, okay? So the other thing about Ayurveda is that each person has a general like a natural stat in each of these. So your vata is a certain number, your kapha is a certain number, your pitta is a certain number. And then your diet, your environment, and other factors can actually alter those levels. So you can get vata buffs and vata debuffs, and pitta buffs and pitta debuffs.
Just to be clear, like we're going to move on to the next video now. I'm not really commenting because I just want to give a baseline. I do have other clips where I've got more commentary to give, okay? So I'm not really looking to comment on this as such. I'm playing it, so you get an understanding of the kinds of things that of Dr. K spoken about in his content, okay? But needless to say, there's obviously more you can watch of this content. It's really just to give you a baseline, okay? So that's the first baseline video that I want to give. Here's the second one, okay?
Fundamentally different because Ayurveda like treats a person. It presumes that all human beings are...
We need to go back. Sorry, I meant to start this from here.
Like, I shit you guys not. Like, I'm really not trying to toot my own horn, but there are people that are in my practice that have been on treatment for, like, have been in therapy and medication for anxiety for like 15 years. And within 6 months, we're taping them off of medication. They feel fantastic. Why? Is it because I'm a brilliant clinician? No, this is what I'm saying. I'm not actually any better. It's just I use tools that none of my colleagues use. I use Ayurveda. So Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is traditional Indian medicine and differs from Western medicine in a couple of very important ways. The first thing to understand about Western medicine is that it's about dividing and zooming in. So Western medicine is about classification, zooming in, sub-classification, further classification.
Remember when I
So, for
was
example,
saying
we have
about
different
that?
kinds of doctors, right? I'm a
It's like
psychiatrist,
a big
which
talking
means
point
in the grand field of medicine, I've zoomed in on the mind and I've specialized in that. And then even further, I'm an addiction psychiatrist. So I zoom in on addictions and I specialize in that. And even more than that, I'm sort of like now
evasion
becoming
bonus.
more and more of a technology addiction psychiatrist. So I'm like zooming in further and like learning more about technology addiction. So that's how Western medicine works. We sort of divide things into groups like cardiology, nephrology, hepatology, infectious disease, psychiatry, endocrinology, pediatrics, OB-GYN, right? So we divide things into lots and lots of categories, and then we become super specialized in one category. Ayurveda is completely different. Ayurveda is not about zooming in, it's about generating patterns from multiple data points. So it's kind of looking at different dimensions of a person and trying to figure out how can we make correlations based on their physical body about what's going on in their mind. Is there some way that we can understand someone's bowel movements and how that will affect their mind? Is there a relationship between how prominent the veins on the back of their hand are? Like, I don't know if you guys can see this, but like my veins are kind of visible. And what that says about their mind. Is there a correlation between how cold their hands and fingers and feet get and their bowel movements? Is there a correlation between their mind and their skin? So Ayurveda looks at like lots of different dimensions of a person and tries to develop an overarching pattern that describes that individual. So that's like fundamentally different from Western medicine, because what we do in Western medicine is we try to break patterns apart and zoom in and understand individual elements. It's like, how does the heart work in this person? What are the principles of the heart? You know, so it's like the exact opposite. One is zooming in and one is
quest
zooming
failed?
out.
Fuck.
The other big difference between Ayurveda and Western medicine is like, if we think about the
Are
gold
vaccines
standard of knowledge
holistic or
in each system of
targeted
medicine.
Western medicine? Targeted. Like a vaccine targets just one virus, so it's obviously targeted.
In Western medicine or allopathic medicine, the standard that we use, the gold standard of our medicine, is something called a randomized controlled trial. This is abbreviated as an RCT. So an example of a randomized controlled trial is I take 10,000 people, and let's say I'm trying to figure out depression. Then what I do is I split them into two groups, a control group and an intervention group, and I give 5,000 people an antidepressant, and I give 5,000 people a sugar pill. Then what I do, the reason we called it controlled is because we try to make the two groups the same.
Then
We
you
try to
make
have
them
have
depressed.
the same socioeconomic status, the same average age, the same gender breakdown. So we try to remove a lot of the individuality so we can isolate the effect of the disease and the treatment. So we're trying to treat depression, not individuals, and we're trying to use randomization and controlling for variables to remove any individuality from the equation. So I'm trying to just look at a disease in isolation and a treatment in isolation and see what the impact of the treatment is on the disease. So what this means practically is that Western medicine is not about treating people, it's about treating diseases. And so that sort of like, if you've sort of trained in Western medicine, you may think that that's the best way, but as you learn clinical medicine, you begin to realize that like people are fundamentally different, right? Like even if I'm a psychiatrist, I prescribe antidepressants from time to time. Try to avoid it whenever possible. But one of the things you quickly learn if you prescribe medication is that medication, even though like antidepressants will have a moderate improvement in clinical trials for people, an individual may get better or may not get better at all if you give them an antidepressant. There's a lot of like individuality that enters medicine. The funny thing is that our system of medicine doesn't sort of factor that in. We don't really factor in individuality in terms of our clinical trials and the gold standard of our information. So Ayurveda is fundamentally different because Ayurveda like treats a person. It presumes that all human beings are different and that in order to like help someone, you have to understand like individually how they function. So I'll give you guys kind of an example. So Ayurveda divides all people into like these three, you have this thing called a doshic balance. And doshas are sort of the three major patterns that kind of govern what people are like. So Ayurveda says, unlike Western, Ayurveda says that individuals have like a cognitive fingerprint that is like different, and that different people have different kinds of cognitive fingerprints. What do I mean by a cognitive fingerprint? When we think about Western psychology, we tend to think that all human beings sort of have like the same psychology, right? If you study psychology, you don't study like an individual, you study like the different like patterns of psychology. So you study like motivation, you study things like habit, you study things like, let's say like hedonics, you study like cognitive behavioral therapy, you study like these general principles about the mind, and like cognitive behavioral therapy applies to like everyone, right? You study kind of like one thing and it sort of assumes that it works for everyone because everyone's mind has cognitions, has emotions, and has behaviors, and that those three things are related. Ayurveda starts by saying that everyone's mind is unique, and that in order to help people, we have to understand what kind of mind they have, because the kind of treatment or intervention that we want to use depends on the kind of mind that they have. So I started using this phrase cognitive fingerprint, and I use this idea of cognitive fingerprint, which is like your unique cognitive makeup. And once we understand your unique cognitive fingerprint, we can structure your life or your diet or your environment to fit with your cognitive fingerprint. And one of the biggest problems that I think a lot of gamers run into is that they assume that they're lazy or they're not functional or they do a bad job because they're using sort of a standard gold standard. They're using a gold standard of what it means to be successful, like a standard.
My mom is a psychiatrist and hates prescribing, or finds people are often over-prescribed. I think the healthy gamer is focused on this field in regards to a holistic approach. I think holistic approach is more helpful in the lens of psychiatric versus other fields. On the one hand, yes, right. The overprescription is a big problem in psychiatry, in medicine in general. Like we see that with the antibiotics and the problem of bacteria resistance. But yes, like there's no denying that is a problem in psychiatry. Now, on the other hand, when we're talking like there is also a big problem in general perception, where people have huge biases against medicine in psychiatry. There is this idea that, you know, everything can be treated with therapy, and in fact, it's always better to do it with therapy. It's sadly just not true. Certain problems you have are just a chemical imbalance in the brain. The same way you would take, if you have a fever, you take an aspirin to lower the to lower the temperature in your body, to lower the inflammation. Well, if you have a chemical imbalance, you take something that compensates for that chemical imbalance. There's nothing wrong with that, and in fact, you could go to therapy for 25 years, and it's not going to change a fundamental chemical imbalance, or at least it's very unlikely to. The causes and effects are complicated. There obviously is to a certain extent. We know that your mind also has can have an effect on the chemistry of the brain, etc. But at a certain point, there is nothing wrong with taking medicine to solve a medical problem. Antidepressants will fuck you up. For example, my girlfriend was diagnosed bipolar, yet she got off her meds, lithium, etc., and she's normal. I mean, that's good for her, and that means the diagnosis was wrong. But I mean, lithium also isn't an antidepressant. Like, I'm on antidepressants right now, and they don't really like change me, fundamentally speaking. But yeah, it's also very, very dependent on individuals and on the interactions that the medication has with them. And I understand that what you're saying, that we're here looking at someone who wants to compensate for all that stuff. So you want us to listen to what he has to say in a more giving him the benefit of the doubt, right? And let's just continue. Oh yeah, also Kool-Aid. Well, lithium is an antipsychotic. Yeah, it is. Kool-Aid. We're checking out the like hate. I don't know if hate is the right term, but the criticism that Dr. K has been receiving over the past couple of weeks. Seeing what's up with that. People are basically accusing him of using pseudoscience and pseudomedicine, or promoting it. So checking this out.
Cognitive fingerprint. So I'll give you an example. Like, they think that you should be disciplined. They think that you should be focused. They think that you should wake up at the same time every day. They think that, you know, these are the things that lead to success. Whereas Ayurveda says, actually, that's just one route to success. And if your cognitive fingerprint is different, that the way that you can like be successful is to kind of play to your strengths. So I think this is going to be way easier to understand once I actually start explaining specifics. So the first thing is that there are three doshas: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha.
Let me explain this.
Vata is kind of like the wind, Pitta is kind of like fire, and Kapha is kind of like earth. Okay, so this should work great for gamers because these are like the elements of your Pokemon, right? So like if you have a Vata mind, you're like an air Pokemon. If there's an air Pokemon, or like grass or some shit, right? If you're a Pitta Pokemon, you're like a fire Pokemon. If you're a Kapha Pokemon, you're like an earth or water Pokemon. So I'll give you guys an example. So Vatas are like the wind. So I'm super Vata. So Vatas have memories and mindsets that are like the wind. So I get really, really passionate very easily. Like I'm like a gust of wind. So I get super excited. And I say that I'm going to teach about Ayurveda today. And I get super hyped up about it. And I blow really hard about Ayurveda. And then like a week later, just like the wind, I just randomly die down. So my mind gets super excited about stuff and then like randomly dies down.
Okay.
So I get excited about
Look,
stuff.
I don't want to sit around this whole thing. This, as I said to you, the purpose of this was just to play some, extended clips of him talking about this stuff. Okay. I'm not really looking to particularly comment on it. Or talk about it in any detail, because there's specific things where I've been able to dig into it a bit more and look at it. But that's just kind of like, I guess, a baseline of the kind of things he says when he's speaking about this stuff in his content previously. Okay, so let's continue on to the next point. So first of all, I want to play this. So this is a video. Well, we'll play the video and we'll go from there.
Two important caveats, which is one is that like it's not just a framework for introspection. That's how we're using it in these cases, absolutely. And it has all of the shortcomings of that. But it does appear that your Ayurvedic dosha actually correlates with genetics and other kinds of things, which I can go into more detail. But
I've been trying to hate this guy for the Pokemon personality quiz thing, but I just can't. It seems so harmless though. I cringe a bit at the whole like gamer analogy stuff, but it's fine. It's nothing inherently wrong. Your dosha is not your Pokemon type.
You know, even for example, like some of my Ayurvedic colleagues in India have been able to predict complications of COVID based on the dosha of the patient. So COVID is one thing, right? But whether this person needs ICU stuff, or they have cognitive stuff, or they have GI symptoms from COVID appears to correlate with their Ayurvedic dosha, which is incredibly fascinating, right? So unfortunately, studies haven't really been published on this yet. We'll see if they ever kind of get published. But it does appear that, like, you know, physicians are able to sort of predict, okay, does this person need to watch out for stroke? Does this person need to watch out for GI complications, cognitive complications, or respiratory complications? Because COVID can cause all kinds of random crap in random people. But if you really think about it,
like if he was promoting all of Ayurveda's principles or products, it would be different, you know? Yeah, I understand that his idea is to take like his idea is to take like what's good in it and and refuse what's bad in it. That being said, he's being a bit of a weirdo here, going off of like the anecdotal magical COVID diagnostic evidence from people. But let's see what he's got to say.
You know, I know it sounds kind of weird, but there's absolutely biology and science that leads to a complication of COVID. It's not random. It's not true.
So, I mean, with this one, I kind of hope it speaks for itself, really. I'm not really sure, like, you know, he claims that Ayurvedic practitioner is able to predict COVID outcomes, and then says, I'm paraphrasing, but then he says something along the lines of, like, hopefully some studies come out to demonstrate this. I mean, he's making a specific medical claim in regards to COVID based on Ayurvedic dosha, and he's admitting that he's got literally nothing to back it up. So that's the comment on that one that I've got, okay? So let's move on to the next clip.
What do I think about homeopathy? So I think homeopathy has less biological plausibility than Ayurveda. There's a reason why I chose to study Ayurveda instead of homeopathy. The clinical evidence is like mixed. I don't put a whole lot of stock into it. It's kind of bizarre, but there is some clinical evidence behind it. But the scientific plausibility is just really makes no sense, which doesn't mean that it isn't true. It could mean that we don't really understand as much, right? So for thousands of years, or like not thousands of years, but, you know, 60 years ago, medical professionals did not understand the mechanism. They didn't see a way in which meditation could be used as a treatment for depression. They didn't understand. I don't understand, like, you have to talk to people's feelings to make them feel better. I don't understand how sitting down and chanting Om for 30 minutes is going to help someone's depression. There's no, like, psychology. Like, Freud would have been confused, right? Because he's like, where's the Oedipal complex? Where's the oral phase? Where's the anal phase? Where's the phallic phase? It's an understanding of these things and dealing with these issues that helps you treat depression. How on earth could sitting there and chanting something for 30 minutes treat depression? So just because science does not understand something does not mean it is not real.
So this honestly is a very fair point. Meditation for the longest time was a very controversial subject in the like discussion between like pseudoscience versus real science. So yeah, like this is fair. This is entirely fair. It's been very controversial for a very long time, and in the end, studies showed that, yes, meditation actually does have a beneficial therapeutic effects. There's just no denying it at this point. So it's not. I don't dislike that point. Now, what I wonder is, do I risk the goblin camp? Ooh, attack speed, critical damage. I want to upgrade my weapons, but I don't want to lose evasion chance.
It just means that we don't understand it, which is something that scientists tend to forget a lot, right? So there's like a camp of people who say that once something becomes verified, it becomes medicine, and therefore medicine is defined as what works. And if it is not medicine, then it is alternative medicine, and alternative medicine doesn't work. Once you study something, once you study alternative medicine and you verify that it works, it becomes medicine. Therefore, medicine is defined by what works. So this is a common argument for people who are like kind of anti-alternative medicine, right? They're like, medicine is what works. And so my question is, if we go back 100 years and people were meditating for depression, is it a part of medicine or not? Because we have no scientific evidence that it works. So then it's not a part of medicine, right? And then the question becomes, if it's not a part of medicine, did meditation help people with depression 100 years ago? And the answer to that question is yes, which then means that alternative medicine works. So like the whole argument kind of falls apart. So this is where when we go back to homeopathy, like I don't see a whole lot of biological plausibility. I don't think that the evidence that I've seen for homeopathy is not as strong as it is for Ayurveda.
Yeah, so
like, for example,
also in his like Ayurveda is one thing, but it's true that homeopathy has been extensively studied, and I don't think I've ever seen a study showing that there's been any proper non-placebo effect from homeopathy.
You know, ashwagandha is an Ayurvedic herb that has been shown to clear beta amyloid, which is one of the things that causes dementia from the brain. And like Ayurvedic folks have been using ashwagandha for like neurological health and psychological health for thousands of years. And so we have like scientific verification of their methods. Whereas the problem with homeopathy, for those of you who don't know, is they like do serial dilutions. So what they do is like, I'm going to take like, a drop of ashwagandha and put it in 100 drops of water and shake it around. So dilute the ashwagandha to be like 1 part in 100. And then I'm going to take 1 drop of that solution and put it in another vial of water. So then it's going to be like 1 in 10,000. And then I'm going to take 1 drop of that dilute solution and I'm going to put it in another solution. And then it's going to be like 1 part per million of the biological compound. And then they administer that as medicine and claim that there's a therapeutic benefit. So there are some trials that show that homeopathic remedies are effective. Like I've seen, homeopathic remedies for, I reviewed a paper about homeopathic remedies for.
Yeah, good to hear. There doesn't put much stock in homeopathy research.
Prostate
that definitely would be cause for concern, yeah.
BPH. And it seemed like their stuff was effective. Like people saw a reduction in symptoms and it seemed like it worked. It's just I don't understand the biological plausibility. So I think the evidence is not as strong. I don't think that the biological plausibility is really there. So,
Okay,
any
so
tips for Pitta?
let's talk about what we just watched, okay? Let's have a little chat about what we just watched there. So, the first thing I want to address are some of his claims about homeopathy, okay? So, he claimed, and he said that clinical evidence is mixed in regards to homeopathy. He also says it's kind of bizarre, but there is some clinical evidence behind it. This isn't true.
Wait, did he say?
This is just false.
Oh yeah, he wasn't
wrong.
categorical about it. That's
what
true.
You need to know from the National Centre for Complementary and Integrative
That's
Health.
true. He wasn't categorical about homeopathy. I wouldn't crucify him on this.
There's little evidence to support.
I think Chud Logic is a tiny bit unfair, in the sense that he might just not have researched it properly. He's like hedging his statement. I researched it and I can confirm. Yeah, there's no. I don't know.
Homeopathy as an effective treatment for any specific medical condition. Okay. Now, obviously, being from the UK, I thought I couldn't resist including something from the NHS. So, what does the NHS have to say about this? Does homeopathy work? There's been extensive investigation of the effectiveness of homeopathy. There's no good quality evidence that homeopathy is effective as a treatment for any health condition. So, this is obviously just taking a piece of the puzzle. Okay. So, I would recommend, and this is all linked in the document. I'm going to share the document. Okay. You're more than welcome to look at my sources, to review what I've put in there, and so on, okay? So this was a study that was conducted by the UK government in regards to homeopathy, okay? So like I say, by all means, you're welcome to look at this yourself, and any of the sources that I've provided, and, respond to them, etc., whatever, okay? So this section here is in regards to the evidence. So our expectation of the evidence base relevant to the government policies on the provision of homeopathy is straightforward. We would expect the government to have a view on the efficacy of homeopathy so as to inform its policy on the NHS funding and provision of homeopathy. Such a view should be based on the best available evidence, that is, rigorous randomized controlled trials and meta-analysis and systematic reviews of RCTs. If the effects of homeopathy can be primarily attributed to the placebo effect, we would expect the government to have...
Hedging his statement exactly, like he was leaving the door open to be wrong about homeopathy, but ultimately unconvinced. Yeah, exactly. That's why I wouldn't crucify someone for not being always categorical. If anything, I think that's a big problem with the whole politics, drama, YouTube, Twitch scene. It's people are rewarded for being categorical, for being like, this is the truth, this is exactly how it is, because that causes drama, that attracts interest, that polarizes people, creates engagement. Like I understand why that people are rewarded for it. It's not a conspiracy, it's just human behavior, but it's not intellectually ideal.
Review on the ethics of prescribing placebos. So it goes into further detail here. I don't want to read through all of this, okay? But I'll just read the conclusions just to give you an idea. But like I say, I strongly recommend you go and read this yourself, okay? So we conclude that the principle of like cures like is theoretically weak. It fails to provide a credible physiological mode of action for homeopathic products. We note that this is the settled view of medical science. We consider the notion that ultra dilutions can maintain an imprint of substances previously dissolved in them to be scientifically implausible. Evidence of efficacy. In our view, the systematic reviews and meta-analyses conclusively demonstrate that homeopathic products perform no better than placebos. We regret that advocates of homeopathy, including in their submissions to our inquiry, choose to rely on and promulgate selective approaches to the treatment of the evidence base, as this risks confusing or misleading the public, the media, and policymakers. There has been enough testing of homeopathy and plenty of evidence showing that it is not efficacious. And this goes on about funding, because obviously that's to do with the NHS, okay? And I could go on, but hopefully you get the point. I do not understand how a doctor would look at the evidence that exists, the clinical evidence of homeopathy, and come to the conclusion that it is mixed. That is absurd. Completely and totally absurd.
Well, yes, but like we were saying, we don't know that he's actually looked at the literature on homeopathy. Well, he did say he could. Did he say? Wait. Let's go back. Did Dr. K? Dr. K said he like considered it. I don't know. It's also something I don't like crucifying someone about, because if you understand the scientific process, you don't say categorically things are this or things are that. You say that the present state of research seems to be the consensus seems to be that things look like this. There is never a consensus on absolute truth in science. There's no such thing. Research is constantly evolving, especially like homeopathy. It's a bit weird to say a categorical statement in the sense that it's many different products, and different products can have different efficacies at different concentrations. Not that I would be extremely skeptical of anything homeopathic. Like he was saying, the dilution stuff makes it very, very unlikely that any of them have any kind of biological efficacy. But who knows? Maybe in 10 years, someone will find a molecule that somehow is effective when there's like just one of them diluted in your like homeopathic pill. That it's very unlikely, but it might happen. So, yeah, it's not something I'd crucify anyone on.
There is no scientific good quality evidence that exists that would allow a doctor to claim that the clinical evidence is mixed. Also, I'd like to note, here, there are some trials that show that homeopathic remedies are effective. He then goes on to claim he reviewed a paper for benign prostate hyperplasia that showed that homeopathic remedy had an impact. Obviously, I would need to know specifically what he was talking about, but based on what I've seen, it's highly unlikely to be the case. And the other point that I want to make as well is that broadly, it is clear that he is using his comments about homeopathy to push the idea that his support of Ayurveda is more justified because it has more of a scientific basis. As discussed earlier, there is little evidence to back this claim up. Moving on. Let's have a look at this. So this is a video from Dr. K on the placebo effect. Let's just watch this first of all.
Okay. And the fact that these...
Okay, the evidence Chud Logic himself compiled in his document and that he showed was more than the evidence for homeopathy. The direct quote from the video, from the document Chud Logic was showing, was that there are some practices in Ayurvedic medicine that might have effect for some pathologies, according to studies. So that's already more than homeopathy. That's not actually a false stance.
Three things are connected. That what I think affects my brain, which in turn affects the function of my immune system.
Yep.
I mean, this is a really key point, because when we talk about healing or improvement, the other cool thing, which I think you've stumbled upon, is that if you want to make a biological change in your body, your mind is capable of doing that.
Yep.
And the really important thing to understand here is, I want everyone to really think about this because it blows my fucking mind. You guys know in cancer, in clinical trials on cancer, what they do is they take 2 people with cancer, they take like 100 people with cancer, and they give 50 of them chemotherapy, which is drugs that travel in your body to cancer and kill cancer cells. They give other 50 people, this isn't precisely true, but they give other people placebo. So placebo is not a real thing, it's like a sugar pill. And the interesting thing is that in these clinical trials, people who get, when they determine the efficacy of the drug, well, the way they determine it is how much did it outperform placebo. That's the standard. It's not how much did it work, it's how much did it outperform placebo. Which means that if you look at a clinical trial in cancer, what's actually happening is there are people who are getting better, their cancer is shrinking on like MRIs, but they're not taking real medicine.
Okay.
So that is staggering, right? So this means that like placebo, and there's a really fascinating Ted Chuck, who has done a lot of placebo research. And the crazy thing that he's discovered is you can even give a placebo to someone and you can tell them, I am giving you a placebo. This is not real medicine. But I have this huge pile of evidence which shows that even if you take a placebo, you will still get better. And do you know what happens when he gives those people placebo? And then he tells them, I believe that even though this is a sugar pill, I think that your rheumatoid arthritis is going to get better. Pewy, do you know what happens to those people when he gives them a sugar pill?
It gets better.
You ever play Battle Brothers?
Even if they know it's a placebo.
Nope.
Not
I never played
blows
it.
my fucking mind. Right? So now I'm getting off on a tangent because, like, what is placebo? Placebo is just all of the mechanisms of the human body and mind that we do not scientifically understand.
Exactly.
But placebo actually gets people better. In cancer clinical trials, in rheumatoid arthritis clinical trials, depression clinical trials, but that's like waffly because depression is in the mind and it's not really real anyway. But you can look at physical illnesses like diabetes and
Have
stuff.
a little Goosey Gander on Steam, my guy. It's fucking
It's
pog.
mind-blowing.
Okay,
It is.
I'll check it out.
So what this means is that
Thanks.
in the same way that we can have an emotional attack that's going to affect your neurochemistry, affect your energy level. We can also do things on an emotional level that will bolster your physical self, your energetic self, your intellectual self. And we can also do emotional processing, which is what a lot of therapy is about. But we can also do something called jnana yoga, which is contemplation. So that's a little bit different from actually just processing someone's emotions. Both of them sort of happen in therapy, but in therapy, we don't really separate out the intellectual mind from the emotional mind. But the yogis tell us that contemplation and reflection, which is I think most of what you've been doing.
We've got to the main point of what I wanted to get to there. So let's talk a bit about that, okay? So the first thing I want to address is this here. And obviously, you know, the question arises, doesn't it seem a bit weird that they would use like placebo in clinical cancer trials? Because if you're giving someone a placebo, like there's no evidence that that's going to like deal with the cancer. The use of placebos in cancer clinical trials is rare. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Interesting.
Where he's getting that from or what he's read, but it seems to be that the use of placebos in cancer clinical trials is rare. First of all, further to that, placebos.
Yeah, imagine also like. And that makes sense. Imagine on an ethical level, you have cancer, you sign up for an experimental trial as like maybe as a last resort to have at least some kind of chance of getting healed, and they put you in the placebo control group. Imagine that, like just on an ethical level, how fucking terrible would that be? How's that legal, lol? Well, it's not like what the document the Chud Logic just showed. They said that they almost never use placebos, but when they do, they warn the participants. They never use placebos in a blind trial for cancer research, and they rarely use them at all. So, and I'm just saying, like that makes a lot of sense, right? How to solve U.S. healthcare costs: prescribe sugar to everyone age 65 and above. Yeah. RNG cancer, hard to describe. Hextile based strategy, Hextile turn-based strategy, low fantasy style, super rough roguelike based around miserably pushing onward through grueling mercenary work, great lore that doesn't shove it in your face, great little events that give you backstory, cryptic hints at future moments to come. Anyway, I've been up for like 40 hours, so excuse my gushing. No worries. This is a gush positive space, okay? You can gush all you want. And it's for cancer treatment, not just like for nausea or pain. Yeah. The document he just showed was specifically for cancer treatment. Quick stun lock him? No. What was the name of the game? Battle Brothers. Did Dom just tell me to gush? Yes. Aw, this looks cute. I say as a guy gets fucking gutted. Actually. You know what? The idea of like a band of mercenaries in a brutal world, it really reminds me of what's its name? The Blade and Mountain Blade. Reminds me. This makes me think of like a roguelike low-res Mountain Blade type situation. You know what I mean? It's quite like that, but more monstrous. All right. You know what? I'll add it to my wish list. And wait, why am I your dom? Did I sign up for that? Right, so placebos are not commonly used in clinical cancer research trials. So this is a fair criticism. Like, why is Dr. K talking about this? He probably like doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Which is kind of cringe.
Placebos. What the placebo effect has been shown to work on symptoms modulated by the brain. Okay, so one example of this is pain. If you take a placebo, it can have an impact on your perception of pain based on our current understanding of like a placebo, okay? This idea that the placebo effect is somehow going to magically shrink your cancer is insane. And it is not at all backed up by the medical science and investigation that currently exists around placebo.
And so this makes a lot of sense.
The statements being made are way in excess of what is currently proven or researched in regards to the placebo effect. So why is he overstating it so massively? Is he able to substantiate the claims he's making in this clip at all?
So just to balance things out, to be fair, Dr. K's analogy is really bad, and Chud Logic just showed it. They don't use placebos in cancer trials. It doesn't make sense. Placebos work, like he says, on symptoms modulated by the brain. But Dr. K is saying this because he's comparing them to placebos in psychiatry, which is modulated by the brain. Psychiatry literally is everything that's modulated by the brain. So there is at least some kind of logic in him bringing up placebos. That part makes sense. The rest, yeah, like this is very, very fair criticism. Dr. K is like Elon. Yeah, I can believe he's misspoke, but if he has a pattern of saying it, not a good look, yeah. Also, there are like 12-ish different origins that give you a lot of cool parameters for runs in varying difficulty. Nice.
I don't believe he can. So let's move on. We're getting close to the end of the clips now, okay? So Dr. K made some comments on stream in regards to him stepping back from the Ayurveda conversation. So let's just have a look at that quickly.
This is part of the reason that, when I first started talking about ADHD, I
Okay, we need to slow down some speed as well. There we go.
talked a lot about Ayurveda because I had personally found that the Ayurvedic conception of ADHD fit better, was a better fit for people's experiences than actually like the Western binary sort of perspective on ADHD. Part of the reason that we sort of scaled back on our Ayurvedic discussion recently is there was once again another post that offered a lot of really good criticisms about some of the scientific studies we were citing and the low quality of those studies. So I don't know if y'all have noticed, but we've sort of taken a step back from Ayurveda. That doesn't mean that we're actually actively revisiting it. So we're sort of looking through the research and really trying to read tons and tons of articles to really figure out, okay, what is it? What can we say that's like sort of scientifically valid and like, what is like more of our interpretation, which by the way, I'm totally fine doing, right? So I'm totally fine on stream. And I hope, I make this pretty clear that sometimes what I'm saying is very supported by science. Sometimes what I'm saying is more supported by clinical experience. And sometimes what I'm saying is not based on medicine or science at all, but is more personal or spiritual in nature. And I think a lot of the people that appreciate our community are ones that sort of appreciate the spectrum because there are different ways of looking at things.
Spiritual, lyrical. And
so kind of going back to ADHD, I think the challenge is that there are,
people have touted this clip, okay, as an example of, oh, well, he's stepping back from the Ayurveda stuff, okay? However, there's a few problems with that. So,
Quest
of all,
failed. I'm an idiot.
Why is it that it took an internet post to highlight the significant scientific issues with Ayurveda and Ayurveda research? Bearing in mind, just to remind you, he is a member of the Council of Ayurveda Research, and he's an associate editor of the Ayurveda Journal of Health. Why is it that it took someone posting on the internet to make him realize that there are significant scientific flaws with what he's talking about? And also, why is the content discussing Ayurveda still available on his YouTube channel and elsewhere when he claims to have taken a step back from it? Because presumably it's not, that stream was from a couple of days ago. It was from 3 days ago. So
In very detail, also with the DLC, there are northern raider barbarian types and southern Arabian cultures and city-states included. So good, I've done like 100 hours this last week alone. Go to bed, no bedtimes. Bed now, no. I'm drinking this double shot blonde roast and there's nothing you can do to stop me, mom. Yes, blonde roast. I roast my beans right in. Okay. Are you a coffee nerd, Emin Lotus? You're making me want to make a cup of tea. I'll make a cup of tea at some point soon. Actually, I think I still have some. Yeah, I still have some. Caffeine. I've become pretty good at making coffee too. I got my and despite being a bonger, I fucking love coffee. I got myself the like Italian style, the Bialetti machine. I find dark roast fucking disgusting. Why? I'm heavily addicted to caffeine. So are most people who drink coffee. If I recall correctly, coffee's addictiveness, just its addictiveness, is like on the level of hard drugs, comparatively speaking. Or maybe I'm misremembering the study. But I remember reading like a study on all sorts of different drugs but classified also by different aspects like health effects, addictiveness, withdrawal symptoms, etc. And like coffee was mild on most parts, but addictiveness was really high. I don't remember if it was like medium or hard drug, but now I'm talking like I have an addictive personality, and when I was 12, 13, I was going into my Spanish class with 2 black coffees. Wait, they let you drink coffee when you were 12? Jesus Christ.
Why has there not been any action to do anything with that content that still exists on the internet? In any case, those are the main clips that I wanted to look at, discuss, dissect, and talk about.
Yes.
Bear in mind, these are videos I've come across
upgrades
in just a few days of covering this. I, of course, welcome others to review his content and see what other examples you're able to find of similar comments and statements. Feel free to DM me on Discord or Twitter if you're able to find any examples you think are relevant. So, my final thoughts on this, to wrap this up, and then we'll be back to business as usual, okay? It is clear that Dr. K believes in Ayurveda and the concept of dosha. Although he has allegedly taken a step back from this, the content is still available to watch on his channel. At best, it represents the pushing of pseudoscience. At worst, potentially dangerous medical misinformation. The first question I ask myself in talking about this and covering this is this ethical? The answer to this is, I don't know. I know that others are focusing on the ethical conduct of Dr. K and other aspects of his work. I'm not really looking to answer that question here. The purpose of this document and coverage of it is to bring attention to the fact that Dr. K goes way beyond bringing some spirituality into coaching online. He is making specific medical claims that are not backed by science, whilst wrapping his brand and his branding in his credentials. Even if unintended, even with disclaimers, this will lend a level of credence to these claims and ideas that is in no way due. Bad information can lead to bad medical decisions. Bad medical decisions can potentially lead to harm, potentially fatal harm. And this is a study that looked at essentially people that engage with complementary medicine and what relation, if any, that has to refusal of conventional cancer therapy. I'd welcome you to read through this. And again, I'm not suggesting that what Dr. K is doing is as bad as this, but I'm using it as an example to demonstrate what the possible consequences are of acting on bad information that leads to bad decisions about medicine, okay? In this study, patients who received complementary medicine were more likely to refuse additional CTV, which is conventional cancer treatment, and at a high risk of death. The results suggest that mortality risk associated with complementary medicine was mediated by the refusal of CCT. So, again, by all means, the sources are there to look at and to discuss and dissect, etc. Okay, I'm not saying that Dr. K is doing this level in what he's doing. Whilst I am not suggesting that Dr. K is necessarily directly engaging in behavior that will lead to the worst possible outcomes, he is presenting Ayurveda, which is a pseudoscientific alternative medical system, to potentially very vulnerable people. The credence he is lending it, even unintentionally, could possibly lead people to explore it further on the belief that it is more credible than it truly is. I believe that Dr. K needs to do more if he truly wishes to take a step back from Ayurveda in relation to healthygamergg. Some ideas that I thought of would be to provide legitimate, quality sources to substantiate claims he has made. Failing this, he should at the very least retract the claims he has made and ideally remove the content so others are not exposed to it. I also believe he should release a video clarifying his position on Ayurveda and make clear the limited level of scientific support it has, and also ensure that future content does not include unsubstantiated specific medical claims as long as he continues to prominently feature his credentials in his branding and name. Now, I've got no control over that. I don't know what's going to happen from here. Maybe nothing. However, at the very least, I hope my content has demonstrated some of the significant issues with Dr. K's conduct, claims, and content. I welcome good faith feedback and am particularly interested in hearing what else others are able to discover in Dr. K and healthygamergg content. Please DM me directly via my Discord below if you would like to share anything with me. Thank you. Chud Logic. And that's it.
Okay. That was the first video. Before I became a gamer gremlin posture destroyer, I stood a decent 6'2". Holy shit. You're taller than me. I feel intimidated. Maybe you should be the dommy mommy in this relationship. Honestly, Dr. K immediately set my quack alarms off years ago when he said he does psych and started talking about humming and breathing techniques derived from a Hindu-Buddhist background. Well, the thing is, there actually is very real evidence for meditation and breathing techniques having therapeutic benefits within psychology. There is evidence for that now. That is not something that is very controversial to say. Now, maybe he does too much. Maybe he insists too much on it, but it's the spiritualism I take issue with, not breathing. Pretty common for folks prone to anxiety or panic attacks. Yeah. Breathing techniques help a lot with that for sure. I've benefited from that myself, to be perfectly honest.